Go away! Go! Go! What is up, guys? So today we are back with another deep dive, diving deeper into the Rainbow Cup, and today we're actually looking at probably one of the most voted Pokemon in like the last 2 days alone. Enough votes in the last 2 days to honestly jump this Pokemon from like nearly dead last to honestly like the reason why we're doing it today. So, today we're actually going to be looking at Omastar, which is a rock and water type Pokemon, maxing out at level 40 with 15s across the board at 2786. So, not too bad. I definitely feel like that CP is more suited for the Ultra League, but hey. In the Great League with a 0 on attack, 9 on defense, and 15 on stamina at level 20.5, you can actually achieve an even 1500, which is great. Now, according to my spreadsheet and all the numbers that I have ran, Omastar should rank around 40th in bulk and 39th in stat product. And by the way, I just actually updated the spreadsheet to be a little bit more accurate on like some IV spreads and some calculations with like CP and stuff like that. So if you're going into the spreadsheet from this video onward, some things may look a little bit different. It did actually change the top 10 bulk because I was calculating the bulk just based on raw stats instead of like IV combinations with the stats. Long story short, Ladian is actually in the top 10 bulk where Fortress actually shouldn't be, but for the sake of like videos, I'm gonna just keep it the way that it is because Fortress is actually a lot more of a meta pick than Ladian already. We're just gonna keep that the way it is, but a lot of the actual stat calculations are a little bit more accurate at this point. So if you've been looking at the spreadsheet before now, definitely take another gander at it because it is a little bit better, I hope. Now, of course, all of these numbers that we've just talked about do come from our base stats here with a 207 on attack, 201 on defense, and a 172 in stamina. Not the most ideal stat setup for PvP, but hey, we can work with it. So moving into our moves here. So first and foremost, let's actually go over 2 moves that I excluded from the list. Our first move is actually Water Gun, and you're probably thinking, holy cow, why would you exclude Water Gun? So Rock Throw and Mud Shot are 2 very enticing moves. Water Gun is pretty straightforward. You put Water Gun on Omastar, you're going to be really good up against the fire types. You're going to be a really hardcore specialist towards the fire types. You're going to have neutral damage for a couple of other typings, but really that's about it. With Rock Throw and Mud Shot, we do get a little bit more interesting, so I decided to actually talk about those more than Water Gun today. But Water Gun is 3 energy per turn for 3 damage per turn. It is a stab candidate, so we do get 3.6 damage after we factor in that stab there. And then our charge move area, I actually left out Ancient Power. Ancient Power is a 45 cost for 70 damage at a 1.56 damage per energy ratio. Not too shabby. Then after stab, it does get bumped up to 84 on the damage for a 1.86 damage per energy ratio. So it's actually a pretty decent move. Of course, it also does have that debuff attached with it. It is what, like a 10% chance to activate. So it's not quite like as secure of a debuff as certain other moves, but for the purposes of this video, I wanted to really focus on Rock Slide and actually Rock Blast, considering that Rock Blast is a faster move just by 5 energy. It actually would be pretty enticing for another build. And that's exactly what I did. I took 2 builds today and kind of pitted them towards each other just to kind of see which build actually makes more sense. Now let's actually get into the moves that I actually did right on the board today. So we do have Rock Throw and Mud Shot. So Rock Throw is 2.5 energy per turn for 4 damage per turn. After you factor in stab, it does bump up to that 4.8, which is great. Then we have Mud Shot, which is a 4.5 energy per turn for a 1.5 damage per turn, and it is a ground type move, so of course we do not get stab off of that. So the reason that these 2 moves are up here is because Rock Throw has an amazing damage for a so-so energy gain, while Mud Shot has amazing energy for a so-so damage. Actually, I'd probably rank Mud Shot pretty bad on damage, but either way. So those 2 moves are really enticing for their respective reasons there. When we move into our charge moves, we actually have Hydro Pump, Rock Slide, and Rock Blast. Now hear me out. Hydro Pump for 75 energy doing 130 damage at a 1.73 damage per energy ratio. After you factor in stab, it does bump up to that 156 for a 2.08 on the ratio. Rock Slide for 45 energy, you get 80 damage at a 1.78 damage per energy ratio. After stab, it does get bumped up to the 96 on damage for a 2.13 damage per energy ratio. And then last but not least, we have Rock Blast costing 40 for 50 damage. We get 1.25 on the damage per energy ratio. After we bump up with stab, it does go up to 60 damage for a 1.5 on the damage per energy ratio. Now the reason that those three moves are up there is because Hydro Pump seems to be like the #1 damage outputting move. It is a really hardcore water move with a lot of damage attached to it. Plus after stab, it is a pretty good efficient move as well. Then we have Rock Slide, which unfortunately Rock Slide is legacy at this point, but for 45 energy, you get 80 damage. After stab, it's 96. Which is the highest damage per energy ratio that we have on Omastar here. So that's actually pretty freaking sweet. Unfortunately, it is legacy. So I thought, well, maybe Rock Blast would actually be a little bit better with shield pressure if we don't have our legacy move. So Rock Blast with 40 energy for 50 damage is not super great, but it is very fast. Ancient Power could be considered a little bit better than Rock Blast if you're going for a more efficient move and you want to kind of gamble on that debuff, but if you are just after raw speed, I think Rock Blast may end up working a little better for you. Now, in terms of the two movesets that I actually took a look at for this video are actually going to be Rock Throw, Hydro Pump, and Rock Slide, and then Mud Shot, Hydro Pump, Rock Slide. So Rock Slide seems to be a really important move for us to have. Even though it does cost that 5 extra energy over Rock Blast, it is way more efficient than Ancient Power, and it does some really good damage up against a lot of things in the cup. The big turnover though is between Rock Throw or Mud Shot. Kind of depends on which one you're going for. And out of those two, it really kind of depends on what you want to target with your Omastar. So let's actually compare these two moves in the shield situations to kind of figure out which one is better. So in our first shield scenario, we have a 0 versus 0, which is where I don't have any shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields, kind of like a mock-up closing type situation, if you will. Our Mud Shot actually ends up winning 50% even on the matchups, which is pretty great. Remember that if you can kind of think of each typing as 20% of the cup, then we're doing 2 full typings worth of Pokemon plus a couple of more. Always remember that it doesn't necessarily round out to exactly 20%. Of course, there are way more water Pokemon than there are electric Pokemon, so just roughly, if you can think of it that way, that's a pretty good number. But Rock Throw here actually ends up winning 51.1, so we do actually inch out just a little bit more with Rock Throw than we do with Mud Shot. Our next shield scenario is actually this 2 versus 0, which is where I have 2 shields, my opponent doesn't have any shields. We actually end up winning 82.6% with Mud Shot and 84.8% with Rock Throw. So here again, we are just a little bit better. Now, of course, with that shield situation, we're not actually worried about the numbers that we win up against. I'm actually more concerned about the numbers that we lose. And that's because if I have complete shield advantage, I want to know which Pokemon still end up having their way with me. And in both movesets, we actually have grass types being our biggest problem. So with a rock and water typing on Omastar, we do have a super duper weakness to grass, which is kind of a bummer. But at least it lets us know, hey, this is a hard counter and we just always need to kind of avoid the grass types no matter how many shields we have and no matter which moveset we have. Our next shield scenario is actually this 0 versus 2, which is where I don't have any shields, my opponent actually has both shields. We actually end up winning 3.3, oh that's horrible, with our Mud Shot with a 25% on the Rock Throw. So as you can see, Rock Throw is pulling it out better there. Now with this shield situation, I actually am concerned about the ones that I win against. If my opponent actually has complete shield advantage, I'd like to know which ones that I can actually beat. With the Mud Shot moveset, we actually only have 3 wins. Oh. Flareon, Charmeleon, and Ponyta are the only 3 that we actually end up winning against with Mud Shot when they have complete shield advantage. Now with the rock throw, it's a little bit different. So we actually do win against the majority of the fire types, the majority of the bug types, and a lot of the Pokemon inside of the water typing that also carry that ice typing as well. We actually do pretty good up against those as well here. Then in our last shield scenario, we have this 2 versus 2, which is where I have both shields, my opponent has both shields, kind of like a mock-up opening type situation, if you will. We actually end up winning 47.8% with the mud shot and 66.3% with the rock throw. So as you can see, this is pretty interesting in the fact that rock throw outperforms mud shot in every scenario. It is just slightly in some of these areas, but it is a big jump here and a pretty large jump here, almost 20% for this specific shield situation there. So if anyone is actually interested, I did actually try to run a complete non-legacy Omastar moveset, and no matter which shield situation you put it up in, it actually just kind of falls behind. So if you're using Mud Shot, Hydro Pump, and Ancient Power, or even Rock Blast, it just kind of falls short in a lot of these situations. I'm pretty sure this 3.3% was the lowest out of any move combination, but it was still kind of not too high. It was still pretty poor there. So for the purposes of the rest of this video, we are actually going to go with this higher rated moveset just to kind of perform the actual simulations for the rest of the video. We are going to go with Rock Throw, Hydro Pump, and Rock Slide on our Omastar. And for these actual matchups, in every deep dive, I always end up taking our subject Pokemon, Omastar today, and I throw them up against the top 10 bulkiest. Now remember what I said about the spreadsheet. If you go and you look at the spreadsheet currently as of you're watching this video, it will be a little different. But for the purposes of keeping the deep dives consistent, this is the top 10 that I'm still using. Because Fortress is still more of a meta pick than Ladian, I don't really feel like it would matter that much if we changed Ladian here. It would just probably give, you know, an extra win to some Pokemon where Fortress probably wouldn't be. Anyways, let's actually get into PvPoke here. You can see we have our Omastar built with Rock Throw, Rock Slide, Hydro Pump. We have one shield for myself, one shield on our opposing Pokemon, and then I have a custom group of all of the Rainbow Cup top 10 Pokemon here. I do have several iterations of Suicune. If you've seen the deep dives before, you already know how this goes. I have all of the Suicunes with their Extrasensory and Snarl, and then a couple of the hidden powers just to kind of see how they fare. And then we have rounding out the last of the top 10 there. So once we hit battle, we can actually see 7 wins, 5 losses, and 3 draws. So Shuckle is a straight up win, which is great. Mantine, which is a straight up win, is great. Dugong, Lantern, Jumpluff, Lapras, Suicune with Hidden Power, Bug, and then we get into our 3 ties here. So Suicune with Extrasensory, Suicune with Snarl, then we have Tentacruel is actually a tie as well with Poison Jab, Hydro Pump, Acid Spray. Then we start to get into our losses. So Fortress is a loss, Suicune with Hidden Power Water, Azumarill, Suicune with Hidden Power Ground, and Suicune with Hidden Power Grass are all losses for us. So the way that we end up interpreting that is if it's a tie, it's going to be a loss. And with the Suicunes, since we do lose to more of the Suicunes than we win against, I do consider that a loss for us here as well. But all in all, that's a really strong showing. 6 wins and 4 losses is nothing to laugh at. I mean, that's pretty freaking strong. So now let's actually get into our countering section here. And this section is basically for whenever we want to bring Omastar, these are the Pokemon that we want to focus our attention on versus these Pokemon are the ones that we want to kind of bring to the table if we're worried about an Omastar showing up. So for Omastar, we're actually just going to go into PvPoke on this one, make sure that Omastar is still built, Rock Slide, Rock Throw, Hydro Pump there, and then we're actually going to have one shield, just like normal. We're going to battle against the entire Rainbow Cup. Once we hit battle here, you can see that we do have a win percentage of 44.6, which is pretty decent. I mean, it does stay in line with our shield scenarios here. So our first typing that we're going to look at is the bug typing, and as you can see, we only have 2 losses written here. So out of all these Pokemon, Scizor is actually a straight up tie, which is okay, that one kind of makes some sense. Scizor does have a ton of resistances. And then we actually lose straight up against Fortress, and we have a loss against Heracross, and both of those actually make a little bit of sense. Our next typing is the fire typing, and as you can see, we have beat 'em all written there, and that's because we literally don't have a single loss in this fire typing. So you can see Charizard is the easiest Pokemon for Omastar to attack here, all the way down to Ho-Oh. You guys know how I feel about Ho-Oh. And you can see Magcargo is actually one of the harder Pokemon to overcome in the fire types, but even then it's not too bad. So now let's actually get into the other side of these countering sections here, with electric typing actually only having 2 wins. So we win against Zapdos and Ampharos, but after that it is straight up losses down the ladder. So Raikou, Jolteon, Flaffy, Chinchou, Electrode, Magnemite, all the way down to Magneton, Electabuzz, and Raichu are our 3 worst matchups in the electric typing there. Next we have the grass typing, which we only have 2 wins in, which is Parasect and Jumpluff. And those 2 make a little bit of sense considering that bugs are going to carry that weakness to rock, and Jumpluff actually having that flying typing is also going to be weak to rock, so that makes a lot of sense. But then you can see Celebi, Execute just gets worse and worse from there. Bayleaf, Gloom, and Blossom are actually our 3 worst matchups in the grass typing. Last but not least, the water typing, the largest typing out of the cup here. So we do have Cloyster, Gyarados, Octillery, Tentacruel, Dugong, Seadra, Krabby, Golduck, and Mantine, Kabuto, and then that's pretty much it for the wins. Now, a common thing with a lot of these are there's a couple of ice types in here, and there's a couple of flying types in here. So we actually just kind of can target in the water typing things that have a weakness to rock. And then there's a couple of oddballs in there like Tentacruel, but if I'm not mistaken, Tentacruel having access to poison types mean that we basically can do a little bit of resistance to that damage because we do carry that rock typing there. Then in the losses, as you can see here, Quagsire, Poliwrath, and I'm just gonna say Azumarill because I guarantee Suicune and Starmie are both using Hidden Power, so let's kind of not like focus too much on those, but basically Azumarill, Poliwrath, and Quagsire are our 3 biggest threats in the water typing, which is not surprising. I mean, those 3 make a lot of sense considering they do carry a lot of that neutral ground type damage for a lot of different matchups, and it's going to really help them out in this matchup in particular. So here's my little opinion on Omastar. I feel like Omastar is kind of he's kind of like a spot filler for me, because if you think about like these 2 movesets are really interesting. I feel like Rock Throw kind of actually sets us up to be more like a Magcargo for the water types, except that we don't really take out our own typing like Magcargo would, but he does act like a Magcargo with a water type instead of fire type, so that's kind of interesting. With Mudshot, we're kind of in the same realm as Quagsire with moveset wise, but not really like on the same level of like win percentages and just flat out just dominance over a lot of the other typings. So it kind of makes it a little weird for me. Omastar definitely has a place, and I definitely think as a specialist it has a lot of utility in fitting into a team very nicely, but it's almost like it's an opposite to Magcargo and a worse Quagsire, if that makes any sense. So I definitely think that on a team it could actually fit really well to actually combat a lot of the flying types. I mean, as you can see, it straight up dominates a lot of the top 10 bulk, which is always great. So it definitely has its place, but it's kind of in an awkward spot for me. I like it, don't get me wrong, I definitely like Omastar, but I don't know exactly how I would build a team around it yet. So that is actually my take on Omastar, guys. Thank you so much for hanging out. Thank you so much for watching. Always remember that if you have a deep dive, you can throw that down below. I'm trying to think of anything else that I need to say. Okay, so today is officially Thursday. You guys are seeing this on Friday, but hopefully you guys will have seen at least part 1 of the regionals today, because I have yet to record it. So I'm finally getting around to that. I've had some crazy stuff happen this week that's kind of been putting me a little bit behind, but hey, we are finally here. We are gonna get to it. So thank you guys for being patient. I really do appreciate it. Always remember that if you like to like videos, you could do that part. If you don't, you could be that guy. But otherwise, let me know what you have to say down in those comments below. And until our next video, I will catch you then.